Hi, I'm Tracy Sheffield, and I spend my time doing several things. I work as a consultant in the veterinary industry. I work as a business consultant because, as we all know, veterinarians are just terrific doctors, but they may not be that interested in looking at a balance sheet or dealing with HR issues. So I provide them support in that area. And I also do that as well, speaking at conferences around the country. I do spend some time working as a practice administrator in what I call my home practice. And so I mostly take care of the financials there. And then I also dabble a little bit in acting, theater. I have to say, I probably got the bug for acting in high school. I was very fortunate in high school. I lived in Eugene, Oregon, and my mother worked at the University of Oregon. And my first introduction to big time Hollywood was a film crew had come to the University of Oregon wanting to know if they could film on campus. And after much discussion, they decided that yes, the film crew could film there, and as long as the university was not mentioned anywhere in the production, they could film there. Not in the credits anywhere. And so my mother was the liaison between the film company and the university. So I got to, after high school, I would walk up to the campus and watch them film the movie. So I got to be there while they filmed several iconic scenes of the movie Animal House. So that was my introduction to Hollywood. So I have been in and out of some commercials. I've done little theater and some extra work and a few speaking jobs. So that's just a sideline that's a lot of fun.
Wait, can I ask you, so how old were you when that happened at the
Oh my
university?
gosh. You want me to? I was 18 years old when that happened.
Okay, because I was picturing like, oh, you're a little, I don't know, some I'm just like, oh, you're kind of coming along with your mom. Oh, she's like, 7 years old and she just
No,
has these
no,
weird. Okay,
no.
you were 18 and in fully functioning human being at that
I
point.
was well, that's debatable, but certainly old enough to go, "Oh my gosh, that's John Belushi standing right there and I'm right over here." And I got to watch them film the food fight scene and the scene where they take the horse up the steps. I got to visit with Tim Matheson and John Belushi on set. It was just wonderful to be 18 and be exposed to all of that.
What job did your mom have there specifically that she was the one who wound up liaising with the
She
entire
her
production crew?
at that time her title was Director of Public Relations.
Okay. And when they came, do you know, and maybe this is too long ago, but actually, if you're 18, maybe you do know, you said, hey, they came to an agreement that said you can film here, but we don't want our signs up and we don't want the thing mentioned in your credits, but you're welcome to film here. Was it that particular movie, or is their general take, unless it's going to be actually affiliated with the university? Absolutely not. You can't have it in your movie.
My understanding, and so this may need to, subject to edit, but my memory says what happened
Yeah.
is the film crew asked multiple other universities to film, and they all turned the film crew down. At that time, the president of, the University of Oregon had been, prior to being at the University of Oregon, it's my understanding he was at Stanford. And when he was at Stanford, a film crew came and wanted to do some filming on campus. And they read the script and they turned it down, feeling that it had no worth or merit, was not gonna be any kind of significant film. And
Right.
it's my understanding that the film that Stanford turned down was The Graduate.
No redeeming value. What? Okay.
Right,
Yeah.
right. So that he didn't want that mistake to be made again. So he gave my mother the script to read, and when she'd finished reading it, he asked her, "What do you think?" She said, "It's funny, but it's raunchy." Remember, this was 1978.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
funny, but it's raunchy. So that was the decision that they came to, like, let's not pass on the filming here, but just depending on how the public reception of this movie might be, let's just make sure we're not, labeled all over the place. So when you watch the movie, there is nothing, and there's nothing in the credits to indicate that filming took place at the University of Oregon.
Now, do you know? I don't. Did you did you go to University of Oregon? And once the film was out, do people like there talk about it at all? Like there's this old building or this old building.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. It is still discussed. Now, first off, we have to explain that I went to Oregon State. That's the
Okay.
Beavers. Mother worked at the University of Oregon, and both my siblings went there. So they are all ducks. I'm a beaver. This is a very touchy subject here for anyone who is familiar with the West Coast. So, but um,
Why didn't you? Your mom probably got that massive either free education or massive tuition break. Why did you decide to buck the school trend and go to the other school?
go to the other school. Well, there was no tuition break back at
Oh,
the time, but at that time, tuition was not a horrible the horrible nightmare that it is now. But always having an interest in animals, horses in particular. And I don't even think I had a chance to mention at the top of the broadcast. I'm currently the president of the Texas Thoroughbred Association. The animal science program at Oregon State is what drew me there.
okay. Okay. Now that makes more sense. Was there, given the fact, were your sisters younger or older than you?
I have an older brother and a younger sister.
Okay, older brother, and they both went to the school your mom worked at.
Yes. Yes.
Was it at all? I know they had that program over there. Are they very geographic? Like, how far, if you grew up there at that one university, how far did you have to go to get to the other, to get to Oregon State?
40 miles.
Okay. So they're very close together.
They are very close together. You can get from one to the other in probably just under an hour.
So you went there for animal stuff, but obviously you were interested in this movie that was being filmed at the time. Throughout elementary, middle, high school, did you have an interest all the way through in either acting or literature or stagecraft, or what did you do in school before college?
I did have a lot of interest and was very involved with the theater department at South Eugene High School. So I was in several productions and helped with the scenes and the sets and had small parts in several productions and just thought it was a lot of fun. Just really, really enjoyed it. So I've always enjoyed it. Um, it must be a family thing because my mother also enjoyed doing a little theater. And since I have lived in Wimberley, we have a little theater group, the Wimberley Players, and I have periodically performed with them. And there's just nothing as much fun as live theater, particularly when things go wrong. It gets really, really interesting. And you
Was
just have to figure out a way to make the scene happen when things go wrong.
was it enough of a draw at the time where you were ever torn between, oh, I'm kind of into the animal in the science part, but this art thing also draws me. Did you ever career wise, did you ever think maybe I want to push harder on the art instead of the science?
No, not career-wise, but it's always been a thing. I've always enjoyed it, and whenever there's been an opportunity, I have taken it, I have grabbed it.
So the whole reason I wanted to talk to you about this was I was going to ask you, you led off with a bit of your current bio, which is that you work in the veterinary medical field doing the stuff that veterinarians aren't the best at. So you help them with stuff that they're not the best at. But then you mentioned, I think it like in a little toss off thing in an email, oh, I was in some TV spotter and I had some acting part. I'm like, what? So how did this thing come to be? Was it local right here in your town? How did it come to be? Or did you have to go somewhere for it? What happened?
Well, it was an interesting series of events.
Okay.
And it ties into my horse background.
Oh,
And so, what happened is a film company was filming a horse sale scene, and it was for a television show. It's on, I think it's on HBO Plus. It's Walker, part of the Walker Texas Ranger story.
okay.
And so they were filming a horse sale scene, and they needed a very particular bit of expertise for that scene, and they needed what's called a pedigree reader. And when you go to a horse sale, you have the auctioneer and then you have a pedigree reader. And the job of the pedigree reader is to read the pedigree, and it's twofold really, is to
Uh-huh.
let the buying public know which horse is in the arena that they are bidding on, so they're
Okay.
very clear that this horse is the offspring of these parents, and then let them know the achievements of the family tree so they can have an idea as to the qualities that this horse might possess.
Okay, my first question is why can't, if the auctioneer has the mic already, how come the auctioneer can't do this?
He can, but that is puts a lot on his plate while he's getting ready to he's got his job to prepare, what he is going how he's going to open the auction on this animal.
Yeah.
So I keep the pedigree reader does the job of introducing the horse, also gives the auctioneer a chance to catch his breath.
That's true. Yeah, he did pretty frantic during the auctioning. So I guess I don't understand that.
So and that's how they chose to do it for this was to have a pedigree reader, but you have to know how to do it, what to say, and how the animal is best presented. So they didn't have a script written for us. The director told the auctioneer and I to just simply say what you would say.
Okay, it's very non-specific.
Yeah, because they didn't really know how to write it because it is a very niche job.
Yeah.
So they didn't know how to write it, and they were very smart in what they did, which was just having people who know what to say come in, and we just said what you're supposed to say and how you're supposed to say it, so it would be real.
And was it all it was not a real auction? Did they find, was it like a place with a lot of horses and they sort of ran the horses through and had extras pretending to be the people buying? Or was it sort of already an ongoing thing?
This was completely staged,
Okay.
and in movie productions and television productions, there is another interesting career set, which is that of a movie wrangler. And movie wranglers have to come up with whatever a film company might need, whether in this case it was a series of we probably had, I don't know, 10 plus horses there that were skilled in the discipline of reining. So we needed 10 reining horses.
Okay.
It's the movie wrangler's job to come up with 10 reining horses and 10 people riding them. And other sets might need trained cats or a skunk or whatever, and it's the movie wrangler's job to come up with whatever the script requires. So
So
we had
how, oh no, I was gonna ask, so how did that Wrangler, was the Wrangler one who found you? Was the overall production company? How did they find you?
Okay, the overall production company was in a bit of a frantic place
Okay.
to fill this. And so what they did is they started calling some of the breeding farms in the state of Texas. And they happened to call a breeding farm where I'm quite good friends with the manager. He and
Mhm.
I have done a lot of work together for the Texas Thoroughbred Association, and he knows me fairly well, and they called saying, "We need somebody who can do this. Do you know anybody?" And Bill said, "As a matter of fact, I do." So then the talent scout called me, and when they found out that, yes, I did know how to do this job, then the casting agency called me from Hollywood, and I did an interview with them, sent them some headshots. Always a good thing for anybody to have headshots. You just never know when you might need to send them off somewhere. So, Brendan, I would recommend you get a headshot.
What, even if I'm not planning on being a pedigree reader
Even if you're
in a
not
film?
planning on a film career, you just never know when something like this because there was a time crunch on it, and I had to send the headshots off right away, and then we did, a Zoom, casting call, and I did some pedigree reading for them, and they were kinda like, "Yeah, I guess that's good. We don't know what you do. That sounded fine." And so it was a lot of fun.
So what was, given that you sort of got to write your script, did you write it all by yourself, or did they tell you, hey, these many horses are going to be here, it needs to last this long? How did that work?
They actually gave me less than I needed because I needed to know what discipline the horses were, whether these were race horses or reining horses or cutting horses, because each niche is a little bit different.
Okay.
And when I asked some of the assistant directors, I got a deer in the headlights look going, "I don't know." I was like, "Do you have a pedigree for me to look at, or do I need to make this up? Where are we at with this?" And this was my morning on set when I arrived on set. And they said, "Why don't you go talk to the wrangler?" I went, "Yeah, why don't I?" And the wrangler said, "They haven't given you the pedigrees?" I said, "No, they haven't." So he gave me the pedigree and we went through it and I made the highlight notes. So I wrote out what I was going to say and then I talked with the director and basically we were selling a horse. Then the main horse came in. I would do the intro for the main horse and the auctioneer would start. And then we would do the following horse. So that was as much of the sequence as we needed to film. And I think we filmed a whole lot of the following horse too, in case they needed more clips of the sale happening.
Did it go particularly smoothly, or were there a lot of weird cuts and stops?
I felt that it went smoothly and my, familiarity with filming like, for example, if you've
Yeah,
seen the movie Animal House, the horse runs up the steps of the, building where the president's office is.
yeah.
That scene where you see the horse running up the steps, and that only takes about 12 or 15 seconds, took 4 hours to shoot.
And you got to watch the painstaking agony of them trying to get it right or get it
Yeah, well,
exactly the way they
what
wanted it?
what happened is that particular wrangler said, in that situation, he said, "I know I can get the horse to go up these steps 1 time." He said, "I don't know if he will do it a second time. You have 1 take." So, setting everything up exactly the way they wanted and the bits of the guys skulking around the front of the building, that sort of said they had to get everything exactly right, camera angles right, lighting right, dry runs, getting everybody positioned just right because they knew they only had 1 shot at it. So, in this case, we shot essentially 2 scenes. There was a dialogue scene between the principal actors, and the sale was in the background. So we had to stand there and pretend to sell horses, but we could only pantomime. We weren't allowed to speak because they
Right.
didn't want that volume interrupting the dialogue that was going on. So we
Yeah.
would pantomime and not speak. So that's really hard to get an auctioneer to not speak. Let me tell you, when you hand him the microphone and he doesn't talk, he's like, "Why are we doing this?" Because of the way they're shooting that part of the scene. So we shot that several times, and then they shot the auction scene from all sorts of angles with us as just background, with us as just principals. We were being filmed close up so they could decide what they wanted to use and how they wanted to use it. So we probably shot the actual auction sequence probably 6 to 8 times. I think, so they could get every possible shot they wanted, and then we did some other follow-up shooting as well. They wanted some background action of somebody falling off a horse, but we're peripherally in that scene, so again, we're pantomiming while they're filming that little extra bit that they wanted, things like that. So we shoot it, and we shoot it until they have every possible angle for every possible circumstance, and so it was a full 8-hour day to shoot the scene, or the 2 scenes.
Have you been through that kind of experience of shooting for either movies or TV where it's kind of, as opposed to what you said, where a lot of times in high school and in college, people have a lot of live theater opportunities, and that's a
Mhm.
whole, and it feels very different. There's no opportunity to reset, there's no opportunity to fix. And this is the opposite, the hyper level of we can make 1,000 versions of the same thing, and then we go back to the edit bay. We can just splice all this up into the perfect version. Was it, had you done this kind of filming before, and what was it like?
I'm very familiar with it. There's a movie that's not, I would say Hollywood's best effort. A movie called Personal Best, and I actually had a lot of fun at the end of one summer, just doing extra work on that, just being part of the crowd. And there was a lot of exposure to shooting and reshooting the scenes. It looks quite good on the movie. The movie's not quite good, but the way they shot the scenes worked out well. But yeah, we would sit around maybe for 3 hours, and then they would line us up in the grandstand. It was a track and field movie, and they would line us up. Okay, everybody sit in section S. Okay, we're going to shoot this way. Now we need you to be over here. And they would move us around and we would shoot the same scene different angles and they would have to move the crowd around so it looked like the stands were full. So we would shoot the same scene multiple times.
Can I ask? I wonder. So with theater, if even people with very small parts, oftentimes, I guess you can't. You're not there for all the rehearsing and work that goes into it, but you probably have a feel for whether it feels good or not because you probably have a chance to see it. With that, did you just see after the fact? You're like, I had no idea if it was good or not, and then I watched it and like, it wasn't that great. Or did you? Did they give you a script? Did you have and you looked at it and thought, well, this is probably not going to be great, but it'll be fun to do this.
Um, I just did that one for fun. Yeah,
Okay.
I that was just totally for the fun of it. That was absolutely for the fun of it, and quite frankly, so is this. I mean, when I do this kind of work, and I've also since I live fairly close to Austin, Texas, I will sometimes answer casting ads for UT film students when they need somebody. How shall I phrase this politely in my age demographic? Um,
Okay.
Sometimes they struggle finding that, so I've helped some UT, film students, with projects, just for the fun of it, and the experience. You learn something every time you do this, so just for the experience of doing it, and it's that's always been interesting and fun. I haven't done that for quite a while, but I should look again and see what's out there. Um, oh, and then oh my goodness, this was another UT film, project, and it was a scam. It was it was a short film, and it was some kind of the plot line was some kind of scam going on in a bingo parlor.
Okay.
And so I invited my mother and my husband and my son to join me on this. So they said, "Yeah, you can bring some more people." So we were all extras in there. And the big action takes place after the bingo parlor is closing down and everyone's leaving. So my husband and I are supposed to walk out of the bingo parlor together and turn right. That seems like some pretty simple stage directions.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, pretty much anybody could do that. So my husband and I, and the door to the bingo parlor was open. So my husband and I walk towards the door, and we get jammed in the doorway like Laurel and Hardy are fighting like animals to try and get out. And the director's yelling, "Cut, cut." So when two extras mess up a scene, that's not cool.
So it's almost somehow the normal ability to navigate your personal space disappeared as the two of you were
Yes,
thinking about being on
yeah.
camera and you just lined right up shoulder to shoulder.
We just got that has never happened to us in the 34 years of our marriage, um, except that one time. We have never gotten jammed in a doorway together, so funny things happen.
Can you tell when you're working on stuff? So either when you're working on a play today
Mhm.
with the local community theater folks, or whether you're working on a bit of a TV show or a bit of a movie, can you do you have a feel for whether the thing's going to be good or not, or not really?
It's hard to say, but yeah, you start getting the feeling minimally, you get the feeling that, "Yeah, this is gonna work.
Okay.
This feels good. We're clicking. This feels good." Um, and the last play I did for our little theater group here was, a play called Sordid Lives, and it was somewhat controversial for our small town. So as soon as you get a group of people who think that it shouldn't be done and should be banned, naturally you get sellout crowds. So we felt an obligation to do our level best with the material. That was the whole reason I even auditioned for that part was whether or not I got a part, I wanted the director to have the widest possible number of choices to put on the best possible performance. That's why I auditioned for it.
Overall, were you all sort of in advance happy that people were complaining about it early on? I mean, that again, there's no such thing as bad publicity kind of thing. And it
Exactly.
sounds like in this case, it's true.
Yes, because we played to sell out crowds, I believe, every performance. So, yeah, that kind of publicity, like I said, publicity is publicity, and it's great.
Do you think so? I've noticed some things also in smaller areas, playing kind of standards that people expect, but then also occasionally, maybe once a year, or once every couple of years, picking something they think will be controversial. And then, do you think that was the intent here, or do you think they didn't even think about it and they're like, "Wait, people do have a problem with it"?
I think they were a little bit surprised because we are located fairly close to Austin, and Austin is a fairly liberal community.
Yeah.
So I think they were a little bit surprised because they tend to do, standard, well-known shows and redo them every 10 years or so.
Right.
And this one kind of got thrown into the mix, which I think is important to keep it fresh. So I thought it was a good choice, and it's a well-constructed play, and, it brings out a lot of important social issues, so it had value, and we sold out, so that was a good thing.
Uh, Rewinding just slightly or moving forward slightly back to the Walker show. Did
Mhm.
you have a chance? Was it mostly sort of the B location team who was doing this, or I think you did mention the principals came? Did you know any of the people, and did in that kind of in that particular on that particular day, did you get to meet anybody, or was it really just kind of like, I'm there, we're doing our job, and then we're out?
Yeah, it's you're there to work,
Okay.
so, at lunchtime, I was in the tent with the principals. Now here's an interesting thing.
Yeah.
At lunchtime, you have there's a lunch feeding station for extras, but as I had a speaking role, I was considered cast. So
Oh.
when I got to the lunch tent, and one of the things you find on these sets, the sets are swarming with assistant directors, and the jobs of all of these ADs are to make sure that everyone is where they need to be when they need to be there, because it's very expensive if you've got to say, "Hey, where's the pedigree reader? Where's the auctioneer? We're ready to film," and they're not here. So it's the job of a lot of these assistant directors just to make sure to be your shepherd, to make sure you're where you need to be when you need to be there. So when it was lunchtime, they took me to the lunch tent and they said, "You're cast, so you get to go to the front of the line," because a lot of the crew, they got me to the tent a little bit late. And so they took me immediately to the front of the line. And they said, "Have whatever you want." And there was a huge buffet of food for, to choose from. And I said, "How much of lunch is left?" And they said they haven't called last man yet. And what happens when the last crew member gets their meal, they call last man, and filming will resume in half an hour.
Okay.
And so, yeah, the principal actors were there, but were there to do a job and not interrupt their lunch. So it's like, no, we're not there to do that. We could do that later afterwards, but not now.
What do your family and friends think about? Are any of them into this too, or is this your sole kind of thing? And then, if so, what do they think about this? As kind of like this side gig hobby of yours?
They think it's interesting, and for example, that last play that
Yeah.
I was in, somehow I seem to constantly be getting typecast as the aging barfly. I'm not quite sure how that happens, and I wasn't doing a lot of my cooking back then because I had a lot of rehearsals, and I just kept telling my son, who was in high school at the time, that his glamorous actress mother was busy. And when after he saw the play, he came up to me and he had 2 words for me and he went, "Yeah, glamorous." So they do think it's interesting, and then when I got called to do this part on Walker, I was able to tell my son, we were gonna be doing something. "No, I can't, your glamorous actress mother is doing a TV show," and so it's just kind of, "Yeah, that's what she does, all right."
Does it? Does your husband ever? I mean, does he ever? Is he ever involved? Does he? You mentioned one time when, like, hey, we can bring other people, so we'll bring you. Or is it really not his thing, and he doesn't want to come watch, or he doesn't want to come involve himself with it?
No, he's interested. He has little desire, and now ever since we got jammed in that doorway, he really doubts his acting abilities. But he's very supportive, and he likes to see what I'm doing. He likes to see the films that I'm in, or the plays that I'm in. So he enjoys it, but he seems to not have any inclination personally to go that direction.
Did you ever have an experience either helping behind the scenes with a production or being in a production? Is there one that really stands out to you throughout your life that really kind of it just either made an impact on you or you thought this is truly a magical thing and I would just like to do this a lot. Even if you decided not to do it, I don't want to go make this my full-time job. Is there something that jumps out and says, wow, this is a particular thing we did that just blew me away?
I don't know if it was one particular thing or just the overarching, I just really enjoy this. I just
Yeah.
really like that. And I think that's more the case with my high school theater productions. I was involved in just about every one of them. Whether I was doing costumes, whether I had a speaking part, whether I had a bit part, whether I was painting scenery, I liked all of it. Um, and then, like I said, as Animal House was a high school experience, essentially, seeing how it's all put together, seeing what goes on behind the scenes. I was right behind the cameras when they filmed the food fight and exactly how all of that was going to look. And what's interesting, it looks a little, I don't know, overplanned when it's being filmed, and then when you watch the movie, it just looks seamless and natural. So it's a little interesting to see what looks stiff and maybe a little forced look totally right on film.
Were you at that time with the Animal House thing? Was it just because of your mom's kind of special place in that production, or were the people who ran it just very open to having people, as long as they kept quiet, didn't mess anything up, you can come watch all you want?
You know, it was my mom's connection that got me on set, no doubt.
Okay.
But you brought up a really interesting moment to me as a lifelong horse person. I went to the '84 Olympics and watched them. And one day when there was no, they were all held at Santa Anita Racetrack. And one day when there was no competition, my friends and I went to Santa Anita just to see what was going on, and
Yeah.
they had set up the backside of the tracks as, training rings, and this was for the, jumping horses. So we went across the track and across the infield, and we just quietly sat and watched, and the American team was about done with their practice, and the Canadian team came in to use that next schooling arena. And we sat quietly and pleasantly greeted people and made comments about their lovely horses and what have you, and we just
Yeah.
sat there and watched, and of course, we had no credentials, we had no business being there, and a security guard came by, and he saw the 4 of us sitting there, and he went to the captain of the Canadian team and went, is everything okay here? Everybody who's here is supposed to be here?" And the guy looked over at us and said, "Yeah, everything's fine here." So, just hanging out and being polite and being respectful, we got to watch the Canadian Olympic team school before, they went in for, the next day or the day after, I think, is when the show jumping, section of the Olympics started in '84. So, if you're quiet and behave yourself, you can do a whole lot of stuff.
Did you, was it mostly on, so on the set at that time, was it
Mhm.
mostly, you mentioned you interacted a bit, you were being polite and nice also.
Yeah.
Uh, did you find there were ways in which you could sort of, by just waiting, were there ways to help out? I mean, can you hold this? Can you do this? Could you put this over here? Or was
Yeah,
it okay?
there is definitely a little bit of that, and, um anybody who wants to do this, I was at a, film group. There was a thing put on by a group of independent filmmakers if you want to get into period piece films, and this was Westerns.
Okay.
Um, they invited a particular group of people to this seminar also to get names of possible extras.
Mhm.
And this was, you had to show your horsemanship skills, you had to do things, and talking about it. And I was talking with, another girl there, and she was saying that, you can, if you want to do this, if you want to get involved with movies, there are so many ways to do it, and you can work yourself into it as far as you want to. It's not as hard as you think. You just have to have the want to, and you have to have the time. You have to have the time to devote. Yes, I can just be a gopher, an unpaid gopher on set, and I'll do this. If you have the time to do it, you can actually get involved in a lot of productions.
Why did you, I mean, maybe somebody finally explicitly told you that after the fact in that situation, but why did you decide, we see, we all know people from high school or college who are really into the arts, and some of them are fairly obsessive about it. It is the thing they want to do, and they obsessively go for it. And as we know, the arts are very competitive. So if you want to be the one everyone's looking at, be the greatest actor or the greatest guitarist or the greatest singer or the greatest director, that is very competitive. What about the arts was the thing that made it that that was not going to be the thing you were going to focus on much more?
I would really have to say exactly that. It is hard. It can be hard to make a living. Now you can choose other directions, technical staff, or in the
Yeah.
case that we've already discussed, movie wranglers, those kinds of things. You can get very involved that way and work continually. The hair and makeup people that I was working with on the Walker set, they are always busy. So, there are, like I said, there's a variety of ways if you want to. I mean, if you have the goal of acting, that's a much harder way to make a living. But if you want it, you can find a way. It's not easy, but you can find a way.
Were the animals just more of a pull than being out in front of people in an audience?
I think so, yes. I mean, I am happiest on a horse. And so that's what's really important to me. And of course, I've always loved horse racing. I've always followed it. And ended up spending about a 2-year chunk of time galloping racehorses and training them, and that was quite a thing. So that is the most fun you can ever have, let me tell you.
If that's the most fun being on a horse, was there also a time when you thought maybe I want to do dressage, maybe I want to do racing, maybe I want to work with horses all the time and spend as much time as possible on a horse?
Yes, and I did that for about 4 years, and a couple of concussions later and a few dislocations later, I went, there's gotta be another way. I think I don't want to be in the horse world as a professional rider. I
Okay.
mean, I did it for years, galloping horses, showing horses, training horses, starting horses, and I went, "You know what? I think I'll be happier if I do this for my own personal fun." So at about that same time, a friend of mine um, opened an ambulatory equine practice.
Uh-huh.
And he did not need somebody full time, but he needed somebody part time. So I didn't need a full time job, so I was still riding and training horses, but an additional source of part time income worked for me just fine. And so that was my first job in veterinary medicine, is riding shotgun for an equine vet. And we saw all kinds of things. We also saw cattle. We saw all kinds of large animal work down in the Rio Grande Valley. So that's what we did, is so that and that was my introduction to working in veterinary medicine. And I think I worked for him for some 2 years, I think.
Was that transition so were the horses you were working with and the kind of work you're doing, not just the riding of it, but are the horses also a little, the ones you're working with, a little more high strung, a little more intense, and so the stuff is just riskier? Whereas when you sort of just went with this ambulatory practice and you're kind of just seeing horses and cattle and was the stress level lower? I guess what I'm asking, because there was, it seemed less risk from the animals, less intensity in the situation.
As a rule, I would say the answer to that is yes, because when you're galloping racehorses for a living, that's fair, and that's where I've had my most serious injuries, um, is galloping racehorses, because you
And
are
what is
going.
would you tell me what in your case, what were you actually doing when you say galloping racehorses? What were the sorts of things you were doing?
Okay, so when you gallop a racehorse, racehorses have morning workouts where they
Okay.
get fit and ready to run, and then they get ridden in races. And those jobs, while jockeys will also work as exercise riders, galloping racehorses is the that's what exercise riders do. We're generally some of us are jockey sized. I'm not at the time. I If you want to get fit and thin, boy, gallop racehorses. That'll take the weight right off you. I'll tell you that right now. It's physically, it's hard work. Um, but there's a lot more exercise riders than there are jockeys. I'll put it that way. So that's what I did. I would gallop them for their fitness in the mornings, and then I did hold a trainer's license for a while, and then I would select jockeys to ride them in the races. But
What? Well, that's interesting. You pick it where there are particular jockeys, particular horse. How would you do? How would you pick? That's interesting. I didn't think about. I thought maybe whoever owns the horse would be the one. I pick him. I pick who.
there is discussion that way, and of course, as in any sport, if you're on a hot streak, you're on a hot streak. So those jockeys are the ones you're looking for, where everything just seems to be clicking for them, just like in any sporting event. You know, golf, tennis, somebody's on a hot streak, they're on a hot streak, and they seem to be winning everything. And it's just no different at all with jockeys. If they're on a hot streak, things are going good. That's kind of who you want. See if you can get them. And I don't know if you're aware of this or not, but jockeys have agents. And so you need to talk to the jockey's agent to see if you can get so and so. Or maybe, you want to try a different, some horses will go better for different riding styles. So you may
Right.
have to go through a couple of different riders till you find the one that clicks the best with that horse.
People who have their own horses and they get really close to the horses, they develop that same relationship we have with our cats and dogs, where that is your animal and you are its person.
Yes.
With these situations, were there ever, how common was it for a jockey to get so wedded up with a horse that like that jockey rides that horse, case closed?
Um, that tends to be what you wanna have happen. You wanna have them know each other and know, okay, this is that is the best of all scenarios, but you can never be sure that that's what you're gonna get
Yeah.
due to jockey injury. If all of a sudden, and that's what happened, with Seabiscuit. His regular rider got badly injured and was unavailable to ride him in the great match race against War Admiral. So they had to get another jockey, even so you always have to be prepared for that. That horse should be prepared to work for someone else as well. Naturally, you want that good bond and that good situation. Um, and when I train horses, I like to think of myself as the translator. My job is to translate the human world to the horse in a way that he can understand it. And it was funny. A horse that I had started myself, had him at the track here in Texas, and he was being led to the saddling paddock for only his second race, and he started to get overexcited and worried. And I was walking with him, and I just spoke to him and I said, "Buzz, Buzz, it's okay." And he turned his head, and the groom leading the horse to the saddling paddock goes, "He really knows you." I'm like, "Yeah, he knows I'm here, and if I'm here, he knows all is well." And it all was well. He won that night.
Are there again, a veterinarian doesn't need to be friends with all the horses, and the people who run facilities don't need to be friends with all the horses. You kind of gave an indication that in the ideal world a jockey really bonds with a horse. Are there certain jockeys who they just do things a certain way so that even if they don't know the horse, they can sort of bend the horse to their will in a very short period of time, whether that's through kind of intense energy they're forcing on the horse, or whether they just have certain tricks they use and every horse figures out what they needed to do pretty quickly?
Yeah, there are riders who have that talent where they can just get on a horse and work with it and figure it out. They
Yeah.
just can. They can. They have this way of doing it, and that is true in the show ring. They're called catch riders in the show ring, where if for whatever reason the person who was going to ride the horse becomes suddenly unavailable, you got to grab somebody who's never ridden it before and have them take it into the show ring, and they can do that. And jockeys have to be prepared to learn a horse just in that warm up time.
Jeez.
Yeah, and some of them are quite gifted at it and figure out a way. Yeah.
What are So since we talked about horses a little bit, maybe the next, if you look ahead to the next 10 years, are there things you want to do either in the horse world and in the acting world that as you think about, or are these kind of things that are a little more amorphous than the career has solid goals, but in acting and horse stuff, look, I'm just volunteering, I'm having fun? Or do you kind of have like a 10-year plan, like I'd kind of like to do this in acting, I'd kind of like to do this with horses?
I don't have I always want to, yeah, with the horses, I do raise a couple of thoroughbreds.
Okay.
So naturally, I want to win the Kentucky Derby. We haven't seen that happen yet, but you've got to have goals, even if you fall short of them. At least if you have a goal, you know where you're going. I have a promising 2-year-old in training right now, so we'll see where that goes. Oh, and here's another fun thing about horse racing.
Yeah.
I also am in a racing club. And a racing club for a fee, you buy in this particular club, I am now the proud owner of 1/40th of 3 racehorses.
Okay.
And 2 of them are gonna be running on Sunday, and 1 is going to be running in a rather high dollar stakes race. I think the total purse on that race is gonna be $150,000, and I own 1/40th of the favorite.
Is there just not are some horses get bought by millionaires who buy a bunch of horses and other
Mhm.
horses that somebody is raising the horse, but they can't find someone to buy the whole horse? How does this club show up?
Okay, so what a racing club does is it allows people to enjoy owning a racehorse
Okay.
without all the burden of the expenses.
Yeah.
So a club gets put together, and the way this one worked is we put the club together first. I think there's still a few slots left in the club, and you pay the money. In this case, it was $5,000 to own 1/40th of 3 horses. And so the club gets put together, and then we went to the Texas 2-year-old in training sale. So these horses are already training and galloping on the track and are already beginning to show some of their ability.
Mhm.
And the club manager decides which horses are going to be purchased. And we purchased 3. And then the club manager puts them with trainers. So you can enjoy owning a racehorse without having to know what trainer to send it to or know what should happen to it. That all gets taken care of for you, so you just get to enjoy watching the horses run. And some years ago, a Kentucky Derby winner named Funnyside was owned by a racing club. And the only vehicle large enough that everyone could ride together to Churchill Downs that they could find to rent was a school bus. So all these people piled into a school bus and went to Churchill Downs, and their horse won.
I'm curious because you kind of said, "Oh, I'm raising some horses and we'll get to the Kentucky Derby." So you having been in horse racing for a long time, I'm curious if it feels like it's really just a money. I mean, there's an exception, but in
Mhm.
most cases, it's really just a money game. Some people have a lot of money to get the right bred horse from the right lines and then test out enough to know which one looks the most promising. And they spend a ton of money on medical and training and all the things necessary. And that's why that horse is a winner. Or do underdog horses that don't come from money pop up in the upper echelons?
They do, and
Okay.
that's what keeps all of us addicted to the game because they do. It's where, for example, the horse, that won the Kentucky Derby this year, Rich Strike. He was purchased for which, I mean, it's a lot of money, $30,000, but he went on to win millions. So, it happens just often enough that all of us have hope. That we all have hope. So, yeah, it happens just often enough. And the, Triple Crown winner, Seattle Slew, was purchased for $12,000. Again, a lot of money, not an inconsiderable sum, but the dream came true. So, just often enough that you go, "Yeah, this could happen to me too."
But if those horses are bought, they happen to be at the market at some time and they're bought cheap,
Mhm.
is the path to those the highest level races, is the path extremely expensive? Or are you saying all along the way, there's a chance that you could have a modest purchase on a horse and then have a modest level of training and time and everything,
Mhm.
and that horse just outperforms because that horse is just a great horse?
Yes,
Okay.
exactly. You stumble upon the diamond in the pile of semi-precious stones, and if you get the diamond, the you know, it will the cream will rise to the top. and it will have there are so many good trainers and good jockeys who don't ever get their hands on the diamond,
Yeah.
and if they do, it happens for them because they're good trainers and they're good riders, but that you to get a hold of the rare athlete, that's that's the great hope for all of us, is we get a hold of that rare, wonderful athlete. Either we bred them or we bought them. Somehow they landed in our lap, and it made the opportunity for all of us. I know several good trainers. They're just wonderful trainers, and then it happened, and the diamond landed in their lap,
Yeah.
and they got to ride the glorious ride of the big time.
So I mean, it does sound a little bit, I feel like major sports with just people, and you're not talking about animals, but NBA, NFL, Major
Mhm.
League, maybe Major League Baseball has a stronger kind of farm league sort of thing where people can kind of come up the diamonds in the rough and then they can
Yeah.
come up and perform at the highest level. But I feel like some of those things you cannot, in those situations, until you cannot play in those situations unless you're fully vetted. Are these things, how does someone get through the lines of racing to get to the Kentucky Derby? Is it simply you show up in such and such a place and you pay your entry, and if you do well enough, boom, you're into the next level? Or is there vetting where some people can
There's
never
there's
seem to get the horse in?
there's races that earn you points towards
Okay.
being able to get into the Derby. So if you have a horse that starts showing it's talented, then you start going, well, let's point him to some of the qualifying races and see how we do. That's how you go down the road.
Okay. And maybe, and this doesn't have anything to do with acting, but since we're on horses, I am curious from your perspective, growing up with a love for horses and a love of animals, and then being involved in racing, there is a lot of sort of growing ambivalence about horse racing. And so, how ambivalent about the future of horse racing are you? Or do you really think it's important? We need to do it? Because I know there's a lot of thinking about, look, these are horses that they can be very fragile. We're kind of breed these horses for a difficult transitory job, and they get injured, and then there's a terrible outcome, which is euthanasia. How do you look at horse racing? Do you think 10 years it'll be there? And do you really want it to be there? How do you feel about it?
Those are excellent questions, and I am extremely active in the second career of racehorses. I feel if we are going to breed these horses, we need to be responsible for them for their entire lives.
Yeah.
So, to that end, I have created an event here in Texas, and I'm going to be running one on this coming Friday morning. It's called the Roses to Ribbons Old Fashioned Horse Fair. And what happens there is that horses who are done with their racing career, perhaps they didn't show any talent for racing, they've raced 2 or 3 times and have
Right.
run at the back of the pack every time. They're just not particularly fast, or they're also what's called, out of conditions where they can win. Each race might be for two-year-olds who've never won a race,
Okay.
okay? Or it might be three-year-olds that have never won 2 races, something like that. These are called the conditions. And a lot of horses can win what they call a maiden where they've never won, a non-2 where they've only won once before, a non-3, and maybe even they might even run a non-4. But then there may not be many other races that horse can win, so it's no longer economically realistic to keep racing it. There's nothing wrong with the horse.
Right.
It's just not going to be able to earn enough money to keep it in racing. So, what I do is I put together this event, and I have all the horses at the track who are ready to look for a second career brought up to the saddling paddock. And then through social media, I advertise it saying, hey, if you're looking for a project horse, because these horses do need to be retrained,
Yeah.
this is an opportunity for you to look. And so, because when you go to buy a horse, if you're a regular amateur rider, you might see an ad for a horse online and you go drive an hour or two and you go look at one horse and it's not what you're looking for and you drive an hour or two home. This way, you can look at 15 or 20 horses in one place at one time. And so, what they do is all the trainers bring the horses up, and then all the people who are looking for a prospect horse come to the track, and it's a giant meet and greet. And some people will buy the horses then and there. Other people will make arrangements, maybe to have a veterinarian come and check to see if he's got any issues. But through this program, I'm really proud to say I'm expecting by the time we're done on Friday, we over the years that we've been running it, we've rehomed somewhere in the neighborhood of 175 racehorses into new careers.
Of the horses that so they're sort of trained to, they thought they were going to race, and they're trained to
Mhm.
race, and they do race.
Mhm.
Do any, from your impression being around these horses, are these horses trained to be racers, or at some point do they become racers where, emotional, they're a little disappointed and a little bored when they don't get to run around anymore?
Well, it depends on what career they want after they're
Okay.
done racing. And I've taken several off the track horses. For that matter, I make it a point of pride. That's the only thing I will take into the show ring is an off the track thoroughbred. That is my deal.
You're like the
Uh,
version, right? You're the of the, you're, it's the version of adopt, don't shop.
yeah, yeah. So this is, this yeah, I mean, and these horses are wonderful. I had one horse that came off the track, and all he really excelled at once he was off the track, and you just wouldn't think it of him because he was on the nervous and edgy side. He was just a wonderful trail horse and sure-footed as anything. It's quite rocky in our area,
Yeah.
and that horse would just go chip, 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 chip right down the trail, just not ever put a foot down no matter how the footing was. He was just the best little trail horse you'd ever wanna sit on. And another horse that we took off the track, she, was so big that she didn't fit in the starting gates, and so her races were disappointing because she simply did not fit into the starting gates, and so she'd have to kinda unwind and uncurl to get out, and so by then the rest of the pack was well gone, and she was a wonderfully bred mare, and we brought her home, and she was gonna be my husband's trail horse, and she took to that right away. She loved it. And then we left town, for a couple of weeks, and we sent the horse off to my trainer who does 3-day eventing, and
Yeah.
said, "Just look after him," because we were gonna be out of town for several weeks. We were going to England to look at actually their program for, retraining of racehorses. So we left the mare with my 3-day event trainer, and when we came back 2.5 weeks later, he goes, "I really like this horse." And he pretty much kept her, and so we made a deal that we would split her 50-50, and we would pay for her food and her shoes, and he would do all the training at no charge. And this was a couple years ago, and I just got notice that she has qualified for, national championships at her level of competition. So, she was a racehorse, she raced 9 times. Best she ever finished, I think, was 4th, but her ability to run and jump cross country is unparalleled. So you just kind of never know that they might actually find out they like the new job even better than the old job.
Yeah, I think there's a cliche vision I think people have of racehorses when they retire. Well, these horses are just going to want to do nothing. And
Mm.
I think some horses get old and in fact do want to do, just like people or cats. Some cats and dogs don't want to do anything. Other dogs are hungry for activity, and they're hungry for, playing with the people and doing the things with the people. So it reminds me very much of the working dog situation where
Mhm,
some of them
mhm.
just want to retire and do nothing, and other ones want to keep active all the way until they're all done.
Yeah, my favorite story from a roses to ribbons was year a couple of years ago. I was running it at Lone Star Park in Dallas, and that's where the one on this coming Friday is going to be. And a trainer from Louisiana called me and he said that he had 3 horses that he wanted to bring, and one of them he said was gonna be a perfect kid's horse, and that's where he wanted this horse to go. He said, "I could take him home and turn him out in the pasture, and he could live the rest of his life there." This was a 10-year-old horse that had been racing for 8 years,
Okay.
and I thought to myself, "Really? This horse has been racing for 8 years and you think it's going to be a perfect kid's horse?" I'm like, "Well, whatever." So anyway, he brought the horse to the roses to ribbon sale. The horse's name was, I believe, Rare Flyer. And the last time I saw Rare Flyer, he was being dragged around the saddling paddock by 3 excited little girls pulling on his lead rope. And just that horse was just following them around wherever they wanted him to go. And about a year later, I got a photo from the woman who bought him. She was looking for some horses to add to her school horse string. And it was a picture of Rare Flyer jumping over about a 3-foot fence and probably a 12-year-old girl on his back. And that horse, what she said, I would take 10 more just like him. He's perfect. And what the trainer's goal was for the horse, he said, I could take him home and just turn him out, but I want him to be someplace where he's going to be loved on and brushed and groomed and fussed over. And that's exactly the future that that horse got.
That horse just, I mean, he must have seen it around a kid or two and thought, holy moly, that horse really likes little girls.
You know, and the horse has what in the horse business what we call a good brain, that he's accepting of what happens,
Yeah.
and just a wonderful, wonderful horse. So you can never quite guess. Just because, you'd think a horse that had been racing for 8 years would be utterly unsuitable for that job, and that's not the case. Or you would think that a horse used to galloping on a groomed racetrack wouldn't like scrambling over the rocks on a rocky trail, and yet they say, "Hey, yeah, I'll do this job. I like it." So
Okay, so I want to ask you this episode, what is the name of the show you were on and is it already aired and how we find it?
okay, the show that I was on is called Walker. It's on HBO Plus. It might also be on Hulu, I'm not sure. And to my knowledge, it has not yet aired, so I'm not sure where, the one day of filming that I did for it, where that episode falls. But
Okay.
to my understanding, it has not yet aired. I'm thinking next month it might be airing because we shot back in April and we're looking at an August filming. I mean, in August, he said a couple of months, so I was guessing August. So coming up soon.
So okay, and we'll definitely look so through the synopses. If I don't watch the show all the time right now, I'll wait for the
Look,
one that definitely has an auction in it.
yes, at the horse auction. And you could tell the bad guy, he was wearing a black hat. Very clear who the bad guy
That was
was.
very on the nose.
Yeah, oh yeah. They didn't miss a trick there. I was like, oh, he must be the bad guy. And he seemed to have a lot of money to spend on the horses. So we can only
Mm.
assume he's very bad.